Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today is a visionary leader at the helm of Hylio, a pioneering company in the realm of agricultural innovation. As the CEO, he spearheads the development and implementation of cutting-edge drone systems that are revolutionizing the landscape of precision ag treatments. His company is not only transforming the way crops are nurtured, but also reshaping the future of sustainable and high-yielding agriculture. From Austin, Texas, I would like to welcome Arthur Erickson. Welcome, Arthur, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Yep, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. That was a great introduction, more than I deserve. Visionary leader, I don't know about that, but thank you.
Pretty cool what you guys are doing. Can you start off by just telling me about your background?
Yeah, so my name is Arthur Erickson. As you mentioned, I am the CEO and one of the original co-founders of Hylio. I grew up actually in the Houston area, so I'm Texas born and raised. I was studying aerospace engineering at UT Austin, and that's where I started this company with a few fellow Longhorn students at the time. And they're still my co-founders to this day. So I have a technical background in the products that we create. But nowadays, unfortunately, I don't get to do very much engineering. I do a lot of business development and general CEO stuff, right? Just putting out fires.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how you started was very interesting. So tell us how it was born and also with your partners.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was studying aerospace engineering, and a lot of our curriculum at the time, and still now that the program still runs, revolves around UAS technology, right? Unmanned aerial systems, aka drones. So I loved drones. It's really easy to fall in love with it. It's flying robots that do cool things. So a very attractive field of study. And not only was it technically attractive to me just as an engineer when I was studying it, but I could also very easily see the potential for the technology economically. I mean, it was very clear that these devices at the very least could transform one or two industries, if not every single industry, right, virtually. So I was more or less, growing up, I mean, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Not sure exactly where that came from, but I always had this idea of just doing my own thing, right? Not that there's anything wrong with working for like a big company, but I wanted to have that creative freedom to create a project, create a product, and go at it alone with some of my close friends and business partners, right? So it was 2015. We were sitting around the dorm room, right? Classic college story. I had been studying drones. I kind of knew a little bit what I was doing, at least from a prototyping perspective. And I just kept telling my roommates at the time, Nikhil, who's now our CTO, and Mike, who is our CFO, so co-founders of mine, I was just telling them, like, look, guys, we could be rich, basically. It was like, hey, these drones are popping off. This is still very early in the industry. If we get in now, we combine all of our powers, we could do something here to at least make a medium-sized splash, right? At the time, I wasn't thinking, oh, it's going to be $1 trillion company, whatever it is, and we're obviously still very far from that. But I just wanted to make a company that was valuable to someone, and that's essentially how it started. So we, back then in the dorm room days, we were trying to create what I would call, as an analogy, like an operating system version of a drone, meaning like it's a multi-use drone that any company or organization could buy and use for a variety of different industrial tasks. So we said, hey, let's make a drone that can carry like a decent payload, about 20, 30 pounds, could fly for a decent amount of time, 20, 30 minutes. And that could be, the payloads on it could be swapped. And so you could put on a camera, you could put on a payload delivery mechanism if you want to deliver coffee or food, for example, medical devices, stuff like that. So we want to make this a modular, very easy to use and easy to maintain hardware piece. And then we also designed the software around it to make that really intuitive to control it. So we were going for kind of, to use, again, a ham-fisted analogy, like the Apple experience. Like, we're going to give you this drone that's just like, you don't think about it, it just does what you want it to do, because we designed the UI, the software so well that it just flows naturally. And that was our big play, right? So we launched that product, and the first thing we do with it is actually a drone delivery project. So we built a number of these initial prototypes, we'll call them MVPs, right? Minimum viable products. And we hooked up with a company down in Costa Rica. And this was back in like 2017. So at the time, and this is a bit of a tangent, the regulations in the US were too prohibitive. So you couldn't do a drone delivery project very easily in the US because FAA would shut you down for good reason, and like a number of different authorities would shut you down. So it was very hard to get the product to market and make some initial money for traction. So Central America was a different story. Not that they aren't responsible, but they had a little more incentive to actually utilize the drones, and they were fast tracking use of them in that region because the infrastructure was so poor. So we found a partner down there. It was a company that was very similar to Uber Eats, but they were Costa Rican based, and they had a customer base. So we took our drones, made a deal with them where they would pay us some X amount of money for every delivery we did, and we delivered food, medicine, coffee, etc., to their
No
customer
way.
base.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. Wow.
hmm yeah, and I know that's like a long answer, but anyway, where this takes us is, so
Yeah.
that's kind of how the company got started. That was our first project. We didn't make a lot of money doing delivery, so we very quickly said, hey, looking around in Central America, it's a very agricultural based economy, right? A region. So we very quickly saw the inefficient way that they were doing chemical spreading and spraying over there with backpack sprayers. Often in challenging terrain, it's really hilly. There's small fields that are cut up and divided by tree lines, fences, and stuff, difficult to traverse. So we said, hey, these drones actually could be a magic pill for you guys, a panacea, right? They're going to be much cheaper to deploy. They're going to spray faster, more accurately, and your operators, your applicators aren't going to have direct contact with the chemicals like they do now. So it's safer for them. So that's how we got into it. We just saw a dire need. It just happened to be serendipity in that region. We saw that ag was really important, and we saw a very clear product fit. So we just said, hey, goodbye delivery. You're not very fun. You're not making us a lot of money. Ag, we loved the culture. We loved the people. We loved the mission. We fell in love with it once we started doing those applications, and we haven't looked back since. So since like 2017, late 2017, after that delivery project, we've only done agriculture based stuff. So there was like a little bit of us like finding ourselves at the beginning there, but we've gone to the farm world now, and like I said, we're not looking back because we love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I hear that a lot about the autonomous land vehicle space too, that a lot of them didn't start out in agriculture, but because of regulation, because of, low population density, it's a good place to start. And once they start in agriculture, they realize how big it is and how much room there is to develop. So it's a common story in the field for people to come in from outside with these amazing gifts and amazing talents and these teams that can do such amazing things and end up in this industry. It's very cool.
Yeah, and it's still like a bit of a secret, right? So a lot
Yeah.
of like the VC money and all the flood of those types of organizations hasn't come in yet, and it's like a good and a bad thing, right? I kind of like that we're able to explore in this market without like the crazy influx of a bunch of foreign investors and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So, how is drone technology a crucial step in safeguarding ag productivity, especially in drought conditions?
Well, the drones themselves are much more efficient at applying chemicals, and it's for a variety of reasons. Primarily, and I'm not a chemist, right? So I'm an aerospace engineer, but my understanding is at a very basic level that when you're applying with finer droplets, if you're applying an herbicide or fungicide, for example, with finer droplets, chemically and physically, they're able to penetrate the plant better, and they can just deliver their chemical goods, the efficacious part of that formulation, more effectively, right? So if you're spraying smaller droplets, you need less overall volume, right? Now, normally, bear with me, normally when you're spraying small droplets, you'd be worried about drift, right? So if you had a high clearance boom tractor and you're just dumping these tiny like mist-like particles, they would probably blow away in the wind because you have no way of getting those particles down into the crop. Now, drones have downwash from their propellers. So by nature, they're
Right.
flying, they're pushing down 200 or 300 pounds worth of downforce. So as you're releasing this fog like coverage, you're pushing it straight to the crops. And so there you're eliminating that threat of drift. So it's by virtue of this unique aerodynamic mechanical setup that you're able to actually get away with spraying less volume, but be just as effective, if not more effective, than the ground rigs. So instead of, I'll give you some like basic numbers. Usually with the tractor, you might be spraying 10 to 15 gallons to the acre, right? And so that's usually only a few ounces of chemical per acre, but it's a gallon or two of water per acre. Now with the drones, you're bringing that total solution dosage down to 1 or 2 gallons per acre. So it's almost like a 90% drop in the total volume, total water you need. So back to the point of the drought, if you're using 10% of the water you previously were using, that's obviously going to be a lot more effective and better sustainable, right? Given the conditions we're in right now.
Yeah, and I never would have thought of that about it pushing the spray down. That's really incredible. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't wouldn't naturally think of that. So that's very cool and a huge advantage. I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's like a unique little trick that, to your point, people at the outside or on the
Yeah.
outside aren't really thinking of that, but that's kind of the magic.
Right. So how big are the drones? I see a picture behind you. Is that's what they look like? Is
Mm.
that actually your product there?
Yeah, that's right. That is our AG 230 model right there. So that is an 8-gallon capacity drone. So it takes off at about 200 pounds or so, all up weight when it's flying around at a full
Hmm.
payload. The biggest drone we make is more than double in size, though. It's called the AG 272. It can carry 18 gallons worth of payload in volume, and that would be about 150 pounds worth of payload. So it's quite big. I mean, it's 15 feet across, tip to tip.
Oh, really?
It's yeah, it's rather large. It's a lot bigger than it looks online or in pictures, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of people are surprised when they first see it in person. And, whoa, this is way bigger than I thought. And it's actually a bit intimidating, right? Because it's essentially it's almost like a small helicopter. It's that type of size,
Wow.
and that'll be about 400, 420 pounds when it takes off. So quite large, and it could carry a human being, not like a super heavy person, but a normal person. Yes.
Wow. And then so what's the coverage like? Like how many acres and how long can it run?
Yeah, so that big drone I just mentioned, the 272, can cover. Depends on what dosage you're spraying at, but if you're spraying, let's say 2 gallons to the acre, which is pretty standard with these drones, about 50 acres per hour. And so in a given full
Oh,
day, if you're out there spraying 10, 12 hours, which some people do in the heat of the spraying season, right? You'll get upwards of 500, 600 acres with it. And so people do, operators, customers of ours do deploy multiple of these drones, and they're actually able to get 1,000 or 1,500 acres in a single day, depending
really?
on how hard they're working and depending on the layout, right? So if you're having to move around a lot, that's going to cut into your time, your productivity. But if you're situated centrally, surrounded by thousands of acres, and you can launch from a central point, then you're going to hit those bigger numbers.
Wow. And then so I'm sure the battery obviously wouldn't last that long. So do you just have several batteries going and you just switch
That's
them
right.
out? Yeah. And
Mhm.
then how does the battery charge?
So there are charger units that we sell with the drones.
Mhm.
And typically, if you're a customer, you're out there with a generator, right? You have a trailer set up where it's on the back of your pickup, relatively big generator for these big drones. So a 20 or even 30 kilowatt generator is running multiple charger units, and you've got
I see.
batteries plugged into those. So it is a bit of, it seems a little hectic when you see it. But as the operator, you very quickly get used to the rhythm of taking batteries off, charging them, taking a new pair, putting them on. And that only takes about 30, 45 seconds in between flights. So it's not a huge deal. It's like a pit stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And how is it operated?
It's mainly controlled. So there's two methods of control. There's autonomous mode, which is how most people utilize it, and there's manual mode as an optional secondary mode of control. So in the primary, the most popular use, autonomous mode is set up where you're accessing our software interface, which is basically Google Maps. So it's actually calling Google Maps API. So you're seeing Google Maps as it is in your area, and it's very visual. So you're just defining a boundary of what you want to spray. So you've got, field A, it's 500 acres. You would just draw the boundary around it, just clicking on the screen. You would close that loop, close that polygon, and that becomes a work area in the software. So on that work area, you could say, I want you to fly at 20 miles per hour, 12 feet above the crop, and I want you to put out 2 gallons per acre dosage. So you give all those parameters to that area, and then you upload that to the drone. So you give the drone those instructions. It uploads, it takes about 10 seconds to do that. The drone knows everything it needs to know, and then you click go, and the drone's going to go spray that field exactly to those parameters that you set, and it's going to come back automatically. So when it runs out of payload, when it's done with its tank of 18 gallons, it'll come back, have you refill it. You click go again, it'll start where it left off. So it'll just keep doing that over and over again until it finishes that 500-acre field, and then you can move on to another 500-acre field, or so on and so forth. So it's autonomous. You as the human operator are just giving it this plan right through this visual interface that we have, and then you're clicking go, and that's pretty much it. And after that, of course, you are there on site, swapping the payload, swapping the battery. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It takes about 30 to 45 seconds. That's what you're doing as the operator. But for the 10 or 11 minutes that the drone is flying, spraying out its payload, you're just chilling. You're monitoring the drone, but you're not doing any physical work.
Mhm. Yeah, amazing. And what about connectivity? So in remote places, sometimes there's no service. So can you set up the day beforehand when you're at home on your Wi-Fi? Is that how you would manage that?
Yeah, that's right. So I won't get too much into the nitty gritty, but like
Yeah.
our competitor systems, for example, often they won't let you work without an internet connection. We
Mm.
are different because we come from a background, and I didn't actually mention this earlier, but we were custom applicators. So we were providing spray services with our own drones for several years, for about 3 years before we even sold a drone. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to learn the market, learn the industry, make the products better based on that direct feedback. So from those lessons, we learned that yes, oftentimes when you're spraying out in the field, whether that's Central America or even just rural America, the United States, there is poor connectivity, like you said. So we knew that as farmer operators, you had to be able to operate this thing without internet connectivity in a vacuum, so to speak. So there's just a direct radio communication link between the laptop or the tablet you're using to control the drones to the drones. You don't need internet. To your point, when you do have Wi-Fi, you can download data, you can download map tiles, for example, in Wi-Fi, in internet, and then have them for offline use when you're in the field. Our system is set up to account for all that.
Right. Wow. So your ground control software is called Agrosol. So did that come before the drone, or did that complement the drone, or did it develop at the same time?
Same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, my story earlier about like our initial prototyping for the multi-purpose industrial drone, that was the infant stages of Agrosol. And then we didn't call it that at the time. I forget what we called it. It was just, ground control software, whatever it was. But that's where it started. And yeah, so it came up. I mean, it was a necessary yin to the yang of the drone, right? You have to have both.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And so looking back to your early days, what were some of the initial obstacles that you faced while you were developing the first prototypes? And then how did you overcome them? I'm sure there had to have been some funny things too.
um, Man, so people always say it's a cliche, hardware is hard. Now, hardware that flies in the air is extra hard because when you mess up, when you write a wrong line of code, or if you even do something as silly as put the propellers on backwards on like opposite motors because they need to be alternating directions, you could flip your drone over, crash it to a million pieces, and it's extremely disheartening. Especially when you're a college kid. You're making a little bit of money, like I was off of internships, but not much. It can get really, yeah, like I said, disheartening, and it teaches you the hard way that you need to be very, very meticulous with your design. Because if you make one silly mistake, it could be 5 grand or 10 grand of this drone just down the drain. Um, that happened a lot. So those were talking about just early day obstacles. I mean, just dealing psychologically with these drones crashing because you tried a new thing, you try a new obstacle avoidance algorithm, or you try just a new control scheme. You want to make the drone a little snappier in its controls or something, or make it fly a little faster. All those could have unintended consequences and just, like I said, crash the drone into a fence or crash into the ground. That happened countless times. I mean, I can't even, like, hundreds of
Wow.
times. And that's just like you're pouring your bottom dollar into it, because I really believed. I mean, obviously, I still believe. At the time, I was like a fanatic. I was gonna make it work. So all my internship money just went into it. And I was eating like ramen, like just like using my buddy's Netflix account. So I don't like have any expenses. Just all my money is going to this company. Same with my co-founders. They dumped like pretty much everything they had to into it. So it was expensive. It was an expensive business to start for college kids. It's not like just sometimes you hear about yeah, I wasn't there obviously, but like the Facebook startup story, it's like it's one thing to have like a server where it's like you're just paying for a little bit of electricity and a little bit of like web hosting time, right? For like an early website. For us, from like a startup perspective, it was very expensive initially because of that hardware element. Um, so yeah, I mean there was funny times. Like I guess I could tell you a little anecdote. um, I love telling this story because it involves my family in a weird way. Because my basically when we were in Costa Rica doing this drone delivery project, we were delivering one evening for a local brewery or like a pub down there. Forget the name, but they were having
That's
like a
awesome.
big PR event where we're going to deliver like a new brand of beer they're coming out with or something, some microbrew stuff. And it was all fun. We did a few deliveries. It was going off without a hitch, but unfortunately, one of the deliveries, the drone didn't come back, right? And so the drone was being sent out like 5 or 10 kilometers, so actually like quite far, several miles away, beyond line of sight, and we had permission to do so from the government down there, at least temporarily. So it would go out, it would come back. So one of the trips that was supposed to come back, we just noticed that its GPS position froze. and we lost contact with it. So obviously, like something bad happened to it. So all we have is like the last known location of the drone. So we go there, and bear in mind this is Costa Rica, so they speak Spanish. And I now speak a fair amount of Spanish, so I'm okay at it. I didn't grow up speaking it. At the time, I didn't speak like nearly any. So it's a bunch of American college-aged people. Just we're now searching through this like Costa Rican suburb, a bunch of people speaking Spanish, like working class people, just wondering what the hell is going on, and search for hours, right? So it was evening when we were already doing these beer deliveries because it was like an evening event. It's like pitch black now, so it's like midnight. We're crawling around with flashlights around this suburb, people giving us weird looks. It's kind of like a Men in Black
Spiders.
thing.
That's all I could
Yeah.
think about. Big spiders and bats and snakes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was like it's a pretty rural kind of area. So my family comes into this because my brother was actually with us at the time. He was just taking, it was summer, so he was off of college. So he was like an intern more or less for Hylio for the time being. And we just for hours couldn't find this drone. And he's got sharp eyes or something because eventually he does spot it, and it's in the bottom of a river. And he spotted one of like the GPS units still had a light on. So you could see the very faint, like
Oh,
the faint glow of
wow.
an LED. It was like in a creek under a bridge in this village. So to get to it, we actually get to go through a person's house. And turns out through broken Spanish, we communicate with the person, and the drone had actually come in, um, barely missed his house, and just kind of like nicked a few trees in his backyard, and then fell in this creek behind his house. So he was very kind, not to be angry with us. He let us go back there, get the drone and everything. We paid him a little bit of money for his trouble, just cover like the broken branches and stuff. But yeah, that was one of the several like near
Right.
disastrous events that happened as we were building this company. And that was one of the more dramatic ones where it actually involved like a drone going down in a somewhat populated area. Unfortunately, no one got hurt, right? So I mean, that was fun, hard, a funny story to look back on, but at the time it was very stressful. Luckily now, what we do typically, I mean, our customers are using these drones. They're only flying 6, 7, 8 feet above crops. And if a drone does have some sort of accident or there's an incident, it goes down into corn. It doesn't go into someone's backyard.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
Onto
that was kind
somebody's
of a
cat.
yeah, it was a tangent. And I veered off of like your original question, but yeah, just crashing these things is expensive and hard, and
Yeah.
it takes a lot of grit and willpower, and the team has to really come together and boost each other's morale to keep going when this keeps happening. But eventually, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and the drones do get better if you work at it intelligently.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like the entrepreneur's story. I
Yeah.
hear it. And so when you came to the US, and what kind of regulatory hurdles did you have um, while introducing it here? And, were most of those taken away because you were on farmland?
Um, to put it shortly, yes. So it was kind of a function of time. So we had gone down to Central America in 2017. By the time we wanted to come back to the US where we're from the whole time, bigger market, right? We just kind of went down there because we had to. Now, by about 2019, when we were coming back to the US, the regulations had opened up a little bit, and there was more
Okay.
common sense stuff like an on-ramp for manufacturers and for users of drones to get properly licensed. So that's part of the reason why we decided it was effective, or it was the right time for us to come back stateside. So yeah, even back then there was the initial rollout of a lot of the licenses that we still use today, and they keep getting better and better. But to your point, yes, because we're in farming or the ag world and it's less populated areas, that does give us a lot of leeway. So there's certain exemptions that we can get that people trying to do a delivery project over Houston or New York or whatever wouldn't be able to get, just because like the risk profile there. So we can do things that are beyond what is normally allowed, and that's through special legal exemptions if you get with the FAA. And it's just generally a faster process to get exemptions in the ag world because, well, now it's becoming more and more crowded, but at least when we first came back to the States, 2019, 2020, there wasn't a lot of ag drone activity. So the wait lines, for example, were a lot shorter and faster for us to get drone stuff through. Whereas like the camera drone wait lines for exemptions are, miles long.
Yeah, for sure. And those are some great points. I think it's remarkable that you guys are developing the systems in-house and you're manufacturing in the US. So why did you choose not to outsource the manufacturing?
A lot of reasons. On a basic level, the stuff you could buy overseas, for example, or just from a third-party vendor at the time. So I keep throwing these years out, but back in 2017, when we were first shifting into agriculture, the payloads that were being offered by like the Chinese made drones, for example, were too light for us. We wanted
I
to
see.
lift at least 5 gallons. So we have to build it ourselves. It was like that simple. I mean, there was a use case that we wanted to hit, like a desired parameter to be valuable to the customers, and the stuff we could buy wouldn't fit it. So then we had no choice but to build it ourselves. Now that the company's become more mature, we're launching more and more products, we're expanding. There are a lot of concerning things I think going on, and but I'm a young guy, and I'm not going to pretend to understand geopolitics and whatnot to any sort of intermediate or advanced level. But I just think it's concerning that a lot of the precious metals, for example, and a lot of like the manufacturing know-how and infrastructure is all centered in China. I wouldn't want to build a business that I plan to have for several years and to become like a household drone name if China, for example, could just decide one day, hey, we're going to stop selling stuff to Hylio, right? So
Yeah.
like I just don't see that being a sustainable thing or a plan, a manufacturing plan or a product development plan if I want this company to be what I want it to be, which is a household name. You know, I want Hylio to be the John Deere of spray drones in the United States. And okay, that's like another story. John Deere's a massive company. They have manufacturing in China, elsewhere, all over the place. But you kind of get my point.
Yeah.
We need to be self-sustaining so we can have that staying power and be a true bastion in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I think just that sentiment will resonate well with everybody listening as well. I think we all can kind of see that we need to be, especially over the last 3 years, we need to be more sustainable within our own capabilities. Because yeah, when products are like a faucet that can get turned on and off, it leaves us, in a lurch. Right. We've all learned that now. So I think that's a huge advantage for you guys, for
Yeah,
sure.
we have like an addiction, another tangent, but we definitely have an addiction as a society to cheap goods, right?
Yeah.
Cheap everything. So cheap microwaves, cheap like plastic cups, whatever, utensils, even cheap high-tech stuff like cell phones and computers. A lot of that, most of that stuff actually is, at least in part, being manufactured in China. Um, it's an addiction that we have to break, I think, for various reasons that you just touched on. Um, I'm not saying that every single thing has to be done in America, but more than what we're doing now should be done here, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good goal. And as you reflect on Helio's journey, and I know you've already touched on this a little bit, but what lessons have you learned about entrepreneurship and innovation that you want to share with people who are aspiring to become entrepreneurs?
It's tough because I never feel like I'm qualified to give a good answer.
Mhm.
I think one of the things it has to come out as like a cliche, but like one of the important things for starting anything is just to not be afraid of failing. And that's very cliche, but I guess I'll try to flesh it out. But I think a lot of times there's a hesitation on the entrepreneur's part that their product won't be good enough. Or it's like, how can my product, if there's TikTok out there, there's YouTube out there that are so polished and they have so much money, how could something I'm making that's similar ever be worth anything to anyone? Or it's almost it's like an embarrassment, or like it's a lack of confidence, right? So you just feel like, how could I ever compare? And that just kills a lot of things in the cradle. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people are fed up with YouTube, TikTok, whatever, and you might just offer one tiny thing that resonates with someone. But there's so many people out in the world. There's 7 billion people, 8 billion almost, whatever it is right now. Like if you can just find one thing and do it well, that YouTube doesn't do, and just expand on that, that's a business, right? So I think people need to approach it, I would say, more bottom up than top down, and not try to. The point I'm trying to make is, don't try to outsmart the market. Don't try to guess what the people want. Just put something out there that's relatively cheap and fast to prototype. See if it gets picked up or not, and if it doesn't, move on, right? But if it does get some traction, maybe even to your surprise, keep pursuing that. I think just entrepreneurs need to be more fearless in that sense and just take a chance. Take a chance, even if you think it's going to be embarrassing or your product's not that polished and you think someone's going to laugh at you, for example. It doesn't matter, right? It shouldn't matter. All that matters is that if someone finds your product valuable, you can grow that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to agree with you. Starting a podcast for the first year, I'm like, who's watching this? Right. And, especially starting a podcast, you have no idea. I don't know anything about broadcasting. I don't know. I just had to learn everything, but I had a message and I had a mission. And, for the first year, it's like, I don't know if anybody's ever going to watch it or listen to it, but now by year 3, we're in the 0.5% of podcasts, the top
That's
0.5% of
awesome.
podcasts globally.
Congratulations.
So it's crazy, right? You have no idea. And if you quit in one of those places where you crash, imagine you just quit then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Right.
same goes for
So
you, right? I mean, I'm sure the first few podcasts you were probably second guessing yourself, being like, is anyone even listening to this?
yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, look at you now. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, I agree totally with that advice for sure. And the lows have to come before you go back up again. So that's awesome. So now thinking about producers, what advice would you give to farmers who are interested in adopting precision agriculture practices and tools, but they're hesitant about integrating these new technologies because there's really so much out there?
This kind of ties in with what I just the advice I have for entrepreneurs, right?
Mhm.
You don't know what you don't know, right? And a lot of farmers are, I think, in this headspace where yeah, they're intimidated by it. Like this looks so new. Like, am I going to be able to handle it? Is it even going to be useful? Um, I don't want to like minimize it, but the cost of these drones, but the drones are much cheaper than typical farm equipment you're typically buying. So like a normal sprayer might be 250, 300,000 used, and if not, half a million new. So we're
Right.
talking just invest 30,000, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but in the scheme of farm equipment, it's not. Just invest a little bit of your budget to a spray drone. See if it works. Like you need to see it to believe it or
Mhm.
disbelieve it. So if you use it and it actually ends up not being very useful for you, then that's good data. But I think a lot of farmers just need to get their hands on it and just at least if you're not going to buy one, at least like pay your neighbor who has one to come spray your stuff.
Yeah.
And before you dismiss it and say, oh, like I can't handle that, you need to try it. It's that simple. So I don't think it's a huge risk for most of these farmers. The way that they're financed with their loans and stuff, I think a lot of them can stomach at least this little experiment. And I think for most of them, it's going to pay out dividends because they're going to see, oh, this is actually a great tool for, if not like your entire field, but at least like the fence rows, at least near the trees. I could do some late season spot spraying that I couldn't do with my tractor without running over 5-10% of my crops. So there's like a lot of benefits that people just don't even know until they try it.
Right. It could be a great opportunity for custom workers as well, right?
Yeah, that's
Doing,
right. Great way to make money.
yeah,
Excellent margins. The drones are cheaper to operate, cheaper to buy, so you can offer some very competitive services.
yeah, fantastic. So I have one last question for you. And I can see how passionate you are and how much fire you have about this. But why do you serve the industry? What are you most passionate about in everything that you're doing?
Good question. And I don't want to come off as hmm, too too head in the clouds. I broadly speaking want to contribute something technologically to the world that advances us as a species. And this goes back to my point earlier. Delivery was fine, but you don't get the satisfaction of delivering a coffee to someone for $5 as it's not the same satisfaction as delivering a tool to someone that helped them grow 5,000 acres worth of corn, which feeds an entire community, if not like an entire city. So I think the mission that we're doing, that we're serving here in the ag industry is just that much more powerful. It's literally feeding people really resonates with me, resonates with my team. We get up in the morning, we know that we're doing stuff that's adding value in a real sense, in almost the most primal sense to this country, to the world even, right? We're helping people make food. Um, I want to help people make food better. So farmers, so everybody has better living conditions, can afford food cheaper, easier. People don't go hungry. I just want to do my little part to help that out. That's what gets me up in the morning.
Wow, and you're doing a great job already. That's amazing.
Appreciate
So
it.
where can people find you?
Hyl.io. I know it's a weird domain, but it spells Helio. So that's our website, hyl.io. There's also hylio.com, which we bought too because we know it's confusing. So you could go to either of those websites. We have social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just look up Hylio on any of those. You can find us.
Excellent. And so thank you so much and best of luck moving forward and gaining market share here. And I'm excited for your future.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was great talking with you. Great conversation, and good luck to you as well as you grow your podcast.
Thank you. And to all who are watching or listening, all the links are provided in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram channels. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Listen Notes, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like this episode, I would love it if you shared it. And have a great day.